My name is Samantha Brooks, and I am 31 years old, but on the morning of my sister's wedding, I felt every bruise of my childhood pressing down on me. The Grand Marlowe Hotel in downtown Chicago glittered with chandeliers, fresh roses, and the sound of a string quartet rehearsing. Yet beneath the gold-plated luxury ran a river of dread I could not ignore. 250 guests had gathered in gowns and tuxedos, champagne glasses clinking the perfect stage for what should have been Lily's happiest day. Instead, it became the day my father shattered his mask, and the world finally saw what I had endured for decades. I had arrived in a navy dress I paid for myself, pearl earrings my grandmother once gave me, trying to stand tall despite the murmurs that always followed me in family gatherings. My mother had already scolded me in the dressing room, saying I looked severe, saying I should smile more, reminding me that Lily was the star. My father was nursing his third whiskey before noon, his tie crooked, his face flushed with the arrogance of a man who thought respect was his birthright. I had already contributed $60,000 to cover the flowers and the musicians, but when the master of ceremonies listed sponsors, my name was missing. It was as if I had been erased invisible except when they needed my bank account. The ceremony ended, the applause rose, and the ballroom shifted to the reception. Laughter, flash photography, and the smell of roasted salmon filled the air. My father stood suddenly at the head table, glass in hand, his booming voice cutting through the music. "Ladies and gentlemen," he declared, "I am proud to announce that my eldest daughter, Samantha, has decided to gift her beloved sister the Lake Tahoe house as a wedding present." The crowd erupted in gasps and claps, phones raised, cameras rolling. My pulse froze. That house was not a family heirloom, not a shared property, but my hard-earned refuge bought with years of overnight drafting sessions and a seven-figure contract in Miami. I heard Lily gasp theatrically, pressing a manicured hand to her lips, pretending shock while her eyes glittered with triumph. I rose from my chair, the weight of every slight, every dismissal boiling into my chest. My voice shook but carried across the hall. "That is not true. I never agreed to give my house away." The room stilled. Someone whispered, "She's ungrateful." Another muttered, "It's just a house, why make a scene?" My father's face twisted crimson. He slammed his glass down, shards scattering. "Do not embarrass us, Samantha," he barked. "Family comes before selfishness." My hands trembled, but I steadied them on the white linen. "No," I said. "Family doesn't mean surrendering everything I worked for. My house is mine." A wave of murmurs swept the hall. The quartet faltered. Lily's smile curdled, and my mother glared as though I had cursed in church. Then it happened. My father lunged from the head table with the speed of rage. His fist crashed against my face, an explosion of pain. Warm blood gushing from my nose as I stumbled backward. My temple struck the edge of a table, glass toppled, and screams erupted. The world spun red and silver chandeliers blurring into streaks. Gasps turned to shouts. Someone shouted, "Call 911." A phone light blinked, recording every second. My father's spit flew as he shouted above the chaos. "You will obey me, Samantha, or you are no daughter of mine." I tasted iron, staggered, clutching the tablecloth to keep from collapsing. Around me, guests scrambled, some shielding children, others holding up their phones, the scandal already leaping into the digital world. My mother shrieked, "Stop this madness," but her hands never reached for me. Lily wailed, "You ruined my wedding as though my blood on the parquet floor were my crime, not my father's violence." In those seconds, the life I had hidden from colleagues and friends broke open like a wound in public view. The mask of a respectable family shattered under the glare of chandeliers and camera lenses. Every insult, every moment of gaslighting, every time they told me I was too serious, too cold, too ambitious came roaring back. I pressed trembling fingers to my face, feeling the sticky rush of blood, and through the haze I saw red recording lights aimed at me and at him. For the first time in my life, my father's power was not absolute. For the first time, the world would see. I was not surprised that my father's fist found me that night because in truth his words had been striking me long before his knuckles ever did. My childhood was stitched together with small humiliations that grew into scars I carried invisibly. I remember being 8 years old, standing at the dining room table with a drawing of a house I had sketched in crayon. I had labored over every window, every roofline, so proud of the straight lines for a child's hand. I slid it across the table to him. He looked down, scoffed, and said, "Business is for men, Samantha. Don't embarrass yourself." My mother laughed softly, a rehearsed laugh that told me she agreed, and then she turned to Lily and said, "Show Daddy your dance routine, sweetheart." He clapped for Lily, his eyes bright, while my paper was pushed aside and eventually crumpled into the trash with the napkins. That was the rhythm of my youth. My father reserved his booming voice for scolding me and his warm praise for my sister. At 13, when I won a regional science fair, he didn't attend. Instead, he sent Lily flowers for winning Best Smile in a pageant the same weekend. When I asked my mother why they never came to my competitions, she sighed, stroked my hair, and said, "Don't be so sensitive. Lily needs the attention more than you. You're strong, you'll be fine." That phrase, "you'll be fine," became the script she recited every time I was left out, every time I was overlooked, every time I ached to be seen. By high school, I understood the hierarchy carved into our family like commandments etched in stone. Lily was the jewel destined for comfort, beauty, and admiration. I was the workhorse expected to stay silent, to support, to provide. At 15, when I nervously presented a project to update the family company's website, my father slammed his hand on the boardroom table and barked, "Stop wasting my time. Business is for men. Learn your place." The room of gray-haired executives chuckled, and I felt myself shrink, cheeks burning, voice choking back tears. Afterward in the car, my mother's words sliced deeper than his did. "You need to stop trying so hard. You make people uncomfortable. Just let your father and Lily shine." Gaslighting became their language of control. When I cried after those humiliations, my mother told me I was imagining things. When I said I felt unloved, she insisted, "Of course we love you, you're just dramatic." When I pointed out the favoritism, my father roared that I was jealous, ungrateful, selfish. And Lily, sweet, Lily would tilt her head, pout, and whisper, "Sam, why can't you just be happy for me?" Those words were weapons wrapped in silk, leaving me questioning my own reality. Was I selfish for wanting fairness? Was I dramatic for feeling pain? They trained me to doubt myself, and in that doubt, they ruled me. There were nights I lay awake in my small room listening to the muffled sound of my parents cheering for Lily's recitals, banquets, or awards, while my own accomplishments went unnoticed. I taught myself not to expect applause, not to crave hugs, not to demand acknowledgement. I believed if I worked hard enough, if I achieved enough, if I became undeniable, then maybe, just maybe, they would finally see me. But the truth was simpler and crueler. They never wanted to see me. They wanted a shadow to make Lily's light appear brighter. At 17, I earned a scholarship to MIT. The acceptance letter arrived in a thick envelope, and I ran into the living room breathless, hoping for joy. My father skimmed it, nodded, and said, "Good. Now you won't be my financial problem." My mother added, "Just don't forget, Lily's senior pageant is the same week. Don't cause drama if we can't make it to your orientation." My chest hollowed out, but I smiled anyway, because I had already learned that showing pain only invited more contempt. Looking back now, I see how carefully they conditioned me. Every dismissal was a thread, every insult a knot weaving a cage that kept me obedient. Gaslighting wasn't random, it was strategy. It kept me from trusting my instincts, kept me apologizing even when I was the one hurt, kept me bending until my spine nearly broke. That night at the wedding, when my father's fist connected with my face, it was not a sudden storm. It was the harvest of decades of rain that had eroded me grain by grain. The violence was only the final chapter of a book they had been writing since I was a child, a book titled, "Samantha Must Never Outshine Lily." When I left home for MIT, I thought I was escaping, but in truth, I was dragging the weight of their words with me. I arrived in Cambridge with 2 suitcases, a scholarship check, and the quiet desperation of someone who believed her worth depended on proving her family wrong. While my classmates celebrated with their parents at orientation, I stood alone under the bright banners of the university, clutching my acceptance packet. I told myself I did not need their applause. I told myself the future would be the proof they refused to see. The years that followed were brutal. I survived on 3 hours of sleep fueled by vending machine coffee and sheer determination. I worked nights in the library weekends, drafting blueprints for freelance clients, summers interning at firms where no one knew my name, but everyone demanded my labor. There were mornings when I woke with my cheek pressed against graph paper, my pencil still in my hand, ink smudged across my face like war paint. I learned to endure hunger, exhaustion, and loneliness because I believed that one day I would buy more than survival. I would buy freedom. By 27, that belief began to materialize. My designs caught the eye of a developer in Miami. They handed me a project no woman from my graduating class had been trusted with, a downtown complex worth millions. I poured every ounce of myself into it, orchestrating engineers, negotiating permits, redrawing lines until my wrists ached. When the ribbon was finally cut, when the mayor shook my hand and newspapers ran photos of my blueprints, I felt something I had never felt: at-home validation. My bonus check was 7 figures. I stared at the number in disbelief, the zeros marching across the page like a small army sent to rescue me from my past. That money became the key to the sanctuary I had long imagined. I scoured listings until I found it: a lakefront house in Lake Tahoe, cedar-framed wide glass windows gazing out over the water like open arms. $2 million paid in full. I signed the deed with trembling fingers, and when the keys slid into my palm, I nearly cried. This was not just a house. This was the childhood bedroom I had never had, the applause I had never received, the love I had always been denied. It was mine, earned without their help, untouched by their control. The first night I slept there, the air smelled of pine, and silence blanketed me thicker than any quilt. I lit a fire curled on the leather couch and whispered aloud, "You did this, Sam. No one can take it." Yet even in that joy, their voices crept in. My father's sneer, "Women don't build legacies." My mother's sigh, "Don't be so dramatic." My sister's false sweetness, "You'll share it with me one day, right?" I shook my head to banish the echoes, but deep down I feared they would come knocking. And they did. The first time my parents visited, my father walked through the foyer as though inspecting property he already owned. "Too big for a single woman," he muttered, running his hand over the banister. My mother tapped the window panes and said, "This would be perfect for Lily's children." Lily herself sent me texts with emojis and hearts dropping hints about weekends by the lake, about how our house was perfect for parties. I ignored them, but the pressure pressed closer each time. It was as if they could not imagine a version of me that wasn't simply a resource for Lily's comfort. Still, I held firm. I changed the locks after my father showed up unannounced. I stopped answering calls when my mother's voice turned syrupy, asking for favors wrapped in guilt. And I told myself that no matter how loud they grew, the deed bore only one name: mine. Every time I walked along the dock, every time the sunrise painted the water gold, I repeated it like a prayer: mine. But I should have known that ownership to them was only a technicality. To them, my success was not an achievement, but a waiting inheritance already promised to the daughter they cherished. They did not ask, they assumed. And when Lily's wedding drew near, when the plans swelled to lavish heights, I felt the storm brewing. My contributions were taken quietly, my presence minimized, and the whispers grew. "Samantha will give her sister the lake house, of course." I laughed it off at first, but the laughter tasted bitter. They were rewriting my story before my eyes, the same way they had erased my drawings, my prizes, my victories. And though I told myself it could not happen without my consent, part of me already knew the truth: my family had never needed permission to take what was mine. By the time Lily's wedding preparations reached their fever pitch, I had already poured more money into the event than I ever wanted to admit. It started with small requests: my mother calling late at night, her tone syrupy. "Sam, darling, you know flowers are so expensive these days. Could you help your sister just this once?" Then came the musicians. Then the lighting design. Every request framed as if I were being selfish to hesitate. And like the dutiful shadow they had trained me to be, I signed the checks telling myself it would keep the peace. $60,000 later, I realized I had essentially underwritten the spectacle, yet when the glossy programs were printed, my name was nowhere. The floral arrangements were a gift from the groom's family. The quartet was sponsored by family friends. I was erased again invisible except for the money I bled. The week before the wedding, I visited the hotel to check on the arrangements I had paid for. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers. The roses I had chosen filled the air with perfume. Yet my mother intercepted me in the lobby, her face tight. "Don't meddle, Samantha. This is Lily's day. Try not to make it about you." My jaw tightened, but I nodded, swallowing words I wanted to scream. When I walked into the rehearsal dinner, the murmurs started instantly. Cousins in tailored suits, aunts with glasses of wine tilted toward their lips, all whispering like I wasn't 10 feet away. "She's still single at 31, all that money and no ring." One leaned close to another and chuckled. Maybe if she spent less time with blueprints and more time with men. Their laughter seared into my skin. I pressed my palms against the tablecloth, forcing myself to breathe, to remember that none of them had earned what I had earned. But the humiliation coiled in my chest like smoke. Lily, in her designer dress, floated around the room like a princess glowing under every compliment. She pulled me aside at one point, her lips painted crimson, her perfume cloying. "Sam," she whispered, "everyone's saying how generous you've been. They're already guessing what your big surprise will be." My stomach turned. "What surprise?" I asked. She smiled slyly. "Don't worry. Mom and Dad will handle it. Just don't ruin the moment." That was when I knew. They were planning something and I was the unwilling centerpiece. On the morning of the wedding, I stood in the dressing room with my navy gown smoothed over my hips, my grandmother's pearls at my ears. My mother's eyes raked over me like I was a blemish on her curated masterpiece. "Why that color? You look severe. Couldn't you wear something softer? Lily is radiant and well, try to smile in the photos at least." She dabbed powder at Lily's cheeks, fussed over her veil, cooed like a stage mother. I sat in silence, my reflection staring back at me in the mirror, a woman both too much and never enough. During the ceremony, I tried to lose myself in the vows in the soft chords of the quartet. I watched Lily beam as Brian slipped the ring on her finger. For a moment, I almost believed I could just be a sister, just celebrate, just let the day pass. But beneath the vows, beneath the champagne and laughter, the storm gathered. At the reception, as waiters poured wine and plates of salmon were set down, I noticed the seating chart. My name was buried at the end of the family table, 2 seats away from a distant cousin, while Lily's college friends sat closer to my parents. Even here, they relegated me to the margins. My father already had whiskey in hand, his cheeks flushed, his tie loosened. My mother perched beside him, whispering in his ear, her eyes darting toward me with contempt thinly veiled as indifference. Lily basked at the center, every toast directed at her, every laugh rising around her like applause. Then came the moment that would ignite everything. My father rose, his heavy frame swaying slightly from drink, and the room hushed. I felt my skin prickle. He cleared his throat, raised his glass, and boomed. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we not only celebrate Lily's marriage, we also celebrate the love between sisters. Samantha, in her generosity, has chosen to gift her Lake Tahoe home valued at $2 million to Lily and Brian as a wedding present." The ballroom erupted in applause. Cheers, phones lifted to capture the spectacle. Lily pressed her hands to her lips in a perfect performance of astonishment, eyes glistening as if she had been caught off guard. But I saw the curl of her smirk. The air drained from my lungs. Every humiliation, every theft of credit, every act of erasure led here to this stage where they would rob me of the one thing I had built entirely on my own. My chair scraped loudly against the floor as I stood, heart-hammering. 250 faces turned toward me. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, the tremor in my hands. But my voice when it came was steady. "That is not true. I never agreed to give my house away." The applause faltered. A hush fell. Someone hissed, "She's ungrateful." Another muttered, "It's just a house." My father's eyes narrowed, rage kindling. He slammed his glass down, shards scattering across the tablecloth. My mother's lips pressed into a hard line. Lily blinked rapidly, her act of innocence slipping. And me. I stood taller, though inside I was shaking, knowing the storm was about to break. The sound of my father's glass shattering still rang in my ears when he stepped forward, his shoulders squared, his voice vibrating through the chandeliers. "Don't embarrass us, Samantha. You know what family means. You will do this for your sister." His words weren't a request, they were a verdict. He spoke as though the house already belonged to Lily, as though my life's work was merely a prop for her fairy tale. Around us, 250 guests leaned forward, their eyes hungry for drama, their phones tilted upward like a jury preparing to record my sentence. I felt every gaze drilling into me, every whisper coiling tighter. Selfish, cold, difficult. It was the chorus I had heard since childhood, now amplified by the grandeur of a ballroom. But this time I refused to shrink. My pulse thundered in my throat, yet my voice cut through the silence. "No," I said, each syllable deliberate. "The house is mine. I earned it. I will not give it away." Gasps rippled across the room. A woman in a sequined dress murmured, "She's humiliating her family." A man near the bar muttered, "It's just a house. Why make a scene?" My mother's eyes locked on me with a glare, sharp enough to slice steel. "Samantha!" She hissed, her tone dripping with venom. "Stop this now before you ruin Lily's day!" Lily herself clutched Brian's arm, tilting her face to the crowd like an actress caught in tragedy. "Sam," she whimpered, "why are you doing this to me? You know how much it would mean. Why can't you just love me enough?" Her words were a knife wrapped in silk designed to paint me the villain. I felt the old ache of gaslighting, the familiar twist that made me question my own reality. But beneath the humiliation, a fire burned hotter. I had sacrificed too much, bled too long to let them rewrite my story one more time. My jaw tightened. Love is not surrender. Love is not theft. I will not be erased. The ballroom grew restless. Guests shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to applaud Lily's theatrics or condemn my rebellion. My father's face flushed crimson, the veins in his neck pulsing. He slammed both palms onto the table silverware, clattering glasses toppling. "Enough," he roared, his voice shaking the crystal chandeliers. "You will do as I say. I am your father, and what I decide is law in this family." Something inside me cracked, then not with weakness, but with clarity. I saw him not as a father, but as a tyrant, a man who had built his throne on fear and obedience. And I realized, standing in my navy gown, blood rushing in my veins, that I no longer bowed to that throne. "You don't own me," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "Not my life, not my work, not my house. I will not give you what is mine." The room erupted in chaos. Some gasped, others whispered, a few raised their phones higher to capture every word. My mother's face twisted into disgust, her lips curling as though she had birthed a stranger. Lily's tears slid perfectly down her cheeks, timed like pearls on a string. "She's ruining everything," she sobbed, clutching Brian tighter. My father's hand shook as he reached for his whiskey glass, his chest heaving with rage. It was then I understood the stakes were higher than a house. This was not just about property, it was about power. For decades they had kept me small, silent, obedient. If I yielded now, I would never be free. If I stood firm, I would face their wrath in its most violent form. And in that split second, under the glare of chandeliers and the weight of 100 cameras, I made my choice. I braced myself as I repeated louder this time for everyone to hear no. "The house is mine. I will not give it away." The silence that followed was electric, a taut wire waiting to snap. My father's face contorted, his hand tightening around the glass. I could see the storm brewing in his eyes, a lifetime of entitlement curdling into pure violence. And though I did not know then what his fist would cost me, I knew one truth beyond doubt: I would rather bleed than bend. The crack of glass hitting marble was the last sound I registered before my father lunged. His arm shot forward with the weight of decades, and his fist collided with my face in a white-hot explosion. Pain detonated across my cheek, blood bursting from my nose as the room gasped in one unified breath. My body reeled backward, stumbling into a table, the edge smashing against my ribs. Plates clattered, wine spilled like blood across the linen, and the chandeliers above seemed to spin in dizzying circles. I heard screams, then high, frantic disbelieving. "Oh my God," someone cried. "Call 911," another shouted. But louder still were the whispers, the phones raised higher, the lenses zooming in. Red recording lights glowed across the ballroom like unblinking eyes. My father, towering, chest-heaving spit flying from his lips, shouted, "You will obey me, Samantha, or you are no daughter of mine." His words thundered as though they were scripture, but in that moment, under the harsh glare of chandeliers, they sounded like the madness of a man who had finally lost his grip. I staggered, clutching the edge of the table, blood dripping between my fingers, my vision blurred spots dancing across my sight. My mother shrieked, but not for me. "Richard, stop! The guests are watching." Her hands trembled, not from fear for my safety, but from terror of scandal. Lily's voice cut through shrill and rehearsed. "Sam, how could you do this? You ruined my wedding." Her mascara smudged perfectly, her sobs painting her as the victim while my blood stained the ivory floor. Around us, chaos erupted. Guests scattered, waiters dropped trays, children cried as their mothers pulled them away. Yet through it all, phones stayed trained on us, capturing every second. A man in a gray suit whispered loudly, "It's all on livestream, look. Facebook's blowing up already." Another hissed, "She's bleeding." He hit her. A younger cousin raised his phone higher, muttering, "The world needs to see this." For once, I was not invisible. For once, their abuse had witnesses. My father tried to reach me again, his arm jerking as though he would strike once more. But this time, two guests grabbed him, restraining him as he thrashed. "Get off me!" he bellowed. His face was purple with rage, sweat dripping down his temples. My mother fluttered uselessly beside him, hissing at the men holding him back. "Let him go, you don't understand. This is family business." But the words sounded pitiful, grotesque in the face of my blood and the chorus of recording devices. I pressed a napkin to my face, the white fabric turning crimson in seconds. My knees buckled and someone caught my arm, a stranger, a woman I didn't recognize, whispering, "Stay with me, honey, help is coming." My ears rang, drowning out most of the noise, but the clicking of cameras, the chimes of phones, sending notifications cut through sharp and clear. The evidence was multiplying, spreading faster than fire. Within minutes, the wail of sirens pierced the night outside. The crowd parted as paramedics rushed in their uniforms stark against the glitter of gowns and tuxedos. They eased me into a chair, shone a light into my eyes, checked my pulse. "Possible concussion, broken nose," one muttered to the other. My body trembled under their hands, not just from pain, but from the surge of realization this was no longer hidden. This was no longer a family secret whispered behind closed doors. This was public, undeniable, immortalized on dozens of live streams already leaving the ballroom. As the paramedics strapped me onto a gurney, my father roared from across the hall, still pinned by two men. "You think this will save you, Samantha? You think the world cares. You are nothing without us." His voice cracked with desperation, a tyrant watching his kingdom collapse in real time. My mother clutched his arm, eyes darting wildly around the room as if searching for allies but found only cold stares, whispers of disgust. Someone near the bar spat, "Monster." Another said, "Poor girl, imagine growing up with that." Lily, still clutching Brian, tried one last act, her voice trembling but loud enough for cameras. "Please, everyone, don't judge my father too harshly. He was just overwhelmed." But the words fell flat, drowned beneath the sight of my blood-soaked dress and the flashing red lights now flooding through the hotel doors. The gurney wheels rattled as they rolled me toward the exit, the crowd parting like waves. I caught glimpses of faces, some pitying, some horrified, some already posting to their feeds. In that haze of pain and humiliation, one thought pulsed steady in my chest. The cage they had built around me was breaking. The evidence was out, and this time, no amount of gaslighting could erase what the world had seen with its own eyes. The sirens outside wailed like a cruel chorus as the paramedics pushed me through the gilded lobby of the Grand Marlowe Hotel. My blood dripped steadily into the gauze pressed to my face, the metallic taste thick in my mouth. Strangers stared as we passed some, with pity, others still holding their phones aloft, their screens glowing with my humiliation. The night air hit my skin, sharp and cold, when the doors opened and the flashing red and blue lights painted the pavement in fractured color. They loaded me into the ambulance, strapped me down clipped sensors to my chest. I stared at the ceiling lights, each one blurring into the next, my thoughts scattering between fury and disbelief. A paramedic leaned over, shining a penlight into my eyes. "Stay with me, ma'am. What's your name?" My lips trembled. "Samantha?" "Brooks. Do you know what day it is Saturday?" "My sister's wedding." The words burned my throat. The paramedic exchanged a look with his partner. "Possible concussion, broken nose laceration to the temple. We'll stabilize and transfer." As the ambulance jolted forward, I tried to steady my breath. Pain throbbed behind my eyes, each heartbeat sending fresh waves through my skull. But worse than the pain was the echo of my father's voice, still ringing as if he were inside the vehicle with me. "You will obey me. You are nothing without us." I closed my eyes and let the tears mix with the blood, whispering to myself, "Not anymore." My phone buzzed in my clutch, sticky with red smears. The screen lit with notifications, texts, calls, alerts from social media. I saw snippets flashing. "Are you okay? This video is everywhere. Your dad hit you." My chest clenched. It had already gone viral. Strangers across the city, maybe across the country, were watching my family unravel in real time. For once, the secrecy was gone. The abuse was no longer confined to the suffocating walls of our home. The world was my witness. At the ER, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead as doctors swarmed me. They stitched the gash at my temple, slid ice packs across my swollen cheek, ordered scans to check for fractures. Each touch made me flinch, but I forced myself to remain still to absorb the reality. My face was bruised, but my spirit, for the first time in decades, felt sharper than the scalpel in the surgeon's hand. A police officer arrived, notepad in hand, his expression grim. "Miss Brooks, several guests called 911 from the venue. We also have multiple live streams showing what happened. Do you want to press charges?" His voice was calm, professional, but his eyes searched mine with quiet urgency. My lips parted, but the weight of the question pressed down like a stone. To press charges meant declaring war on the people who raised me, exposing every rotten layer of our so-called family. To refuse meant surrender silence, returning to the cage. I looked down at my bandaged hands trembling against the hospital sheet. My father's voice taunted me in memory. My mother's glare burned in my skull. Lily's tears, her staged innocence, dripped like poison. And then I thought of my house, the sanctuary I had built with my own sweat. I thought of the girl I had been at 8 years old, her crayon house crushed into the trash. I thought of the years at MIT, the sleepless nights, the skyscrapers that bore my fingerprints. I thought of the Lake Tahoe sunrise golden across the water, whispering freedom. And I knew. "Yes," I whispered, my voice hoarse but steady. "I want to press charges." The officer nodded, scribbling. "We'll need a full statement, but the evidence is clear. You're not alone in this." His words anchored me. Not alone. For the first time, I believed it. As the nurse adjusted the IV, I caught sight of my reflection in the metal panel beside the bed. My face was battered, swollen, stitched. Yet in my eyes, I saw something new, defiance that no bruise could conceal. This night was not my downfall. It was my beginning. I reached for my phone again. Among the flood of messages, one stood out: Ethan Cole, my mentor, my ally. I saw the video. "Hold strong. Call me when you're ready. They won't get away with this." My breath steadied as I read it, my chest filling not with dread, but with resolve. My family had written me as the obedient daughter, the silent supporter, the invisible shadow. Tonight, I would rewrite the script. Tonight, their violence had been broadcast to the world, and tomorrow, my revenge, measured legal, undeniable, would begin. The next morning, sunlight slanted through the thin blinds of the hospital room, striping my blanket in pale gold. My face throbbed with every breath, the stitches pulling tight at my temple, the swelling on my cheek, heavy as stone. But I was awake, alive, and no longer afraid. The phone buzzed again, the screen flooded with notifications. Videos of my father's punch had already been shared thousands of times. Headlines flashed: CEO strikes daughter at daughter's wedding. The world was watching. Ethan Cole arrived just after 9. He filled the doorway with quiet authority, his tailored suit crisp, his eyes sharp but softened when they landed on me. Ethan was more than a mentor. He was the man who had given me my first shot at a major project, who had told me that my designs carried weight. Now he pulled a chair close to my bed. "Sam," he said, voice low, "I saw everything. Are you ready to fight?" I swallowed hard, nodding. "I pressed charges last night. I'm not backing down." My voice cracked but held firm. Ethan's mouth curved into a grim smile. "Good, because your father has no idea what he's up against. Remember the contracts we drew up when you bought the lake house?" My brows knitted. "The protection clauses." He nodded. Clause 15.3. In the event of coercion threat or physical harm intended to transfer ownership, I, as your advisor, have the authority to trigger immediate legal intervention. We built it to keep you safe from exactly this kind of stunt. My heart pounded. I remembered the hours in Ethan's office, him insisting we add language that felt paranoid at the time. Sam, he'd said back then, when people see a woman succeed, especially one from a family that doesn't value her, they'll try to claw it back. This clause ensures they can't. I hadn't believed then how right he would be. "Your father announced the transfer in front of 200 witnesses." Ethan continued, pulling a folder from his briefcase. "That alone violates the clause. And now, assault caught on live stream. It's ironclad. We can strip him of any claim before he even tries to touch a document." I exhaled shakily, pressing my hand to the bandages on my face. "So what happens now?" Ethan leaned in, his voice steady. "Now we make this public. Not just the assault, but the paper trail. We expose his attempt to steal from you, his abuse, his coercion. We show the world this isn't just family drama, it's criminal." The words lit something fierce inside me. For so long, I had been conditioned to hide the bruises, the insults, the favoritism. But here was a man saying we would drag it all into the light. "He'll fight back," I whispered. "He already lost," Ethan replied. "The evidence is bigger than his power, but you have to be willing to let the world see all of it." I thought of the guests in their sequined dresses, whispering selfish as blood poured down my face. I thought of Lily clutching her pearls, pretending innocence while smirking inside. I thought of my mother hissing, "Stop this before you ruin Lily's day." And I thought of my father red-faced and roaring, "You are nothing without us." My chest tightened, but then loosened as if iron bands were snapping. "Let them see," I said. "Let everyone see." Ethan handed me a pen, his finger tapping the line in the contract where I needed to sign. "This authorizes me to represent you immediately. By tomorrow, injunctions will be filed. Your father's access to any part of your estate will be blocked, and when we walk into that ballroom again, Sam, it won't be as a daughter they can control. It will be as the owner protected by law, demanding justice." I scrawled my name across the paper, the ink shaking slightly from my trembling hand. It felt like signing a Declaration of Independence, one written not in ink alone but in blood shed the night before. As Ethan packed up, he paused, his eyes hardening. "There's something else. Several board members from your father's company were guests. They've already reached out. They want a meeting. They've seen enough." A shiver ran down my spine. The fortress my father had built brick by brick on intimidation and fear was beginning to crack. This wasn't just about my house anymore. This was about his empire. I leaned back against the pillows, my body aching but my spirit sharper than ever. "Set it up," I said. "Let them watch him fall." Ethan's nod was firm, his hand briefly squeezing mine. "We'll make sure of it." As he left, I stared out the window at the morning sun breaking through the skyline. The girl they had tried to silence was gone. The woman who remained was ready for war. The ballroom smelled different when I returned 2 days later, less of roses and champagne, more of tension and fear. The Grand Marlowe Hotel staff had cleaned the bloodstains from the parquet floor, but they couldn't erase the memory. Whispers rippled across the room before I even entered. Guests who had witnessed my father's violence sat stiffly at tables, their laughter muted, their eyes darting toward the doors as though waiting for another eruption. At the head table, my father sat with his jaw clenched, his cheek sagging under the weight of humiliation. My mother perched beside him, lips pinched, whispering furiously into his ear. Lily, still glowing in the aftermath of her lavish wedding, wore her best impression of innocence, her hand clasped tightly around Brian's, her eyes glittering with the fragile hope that the scandal might yet be contained. But the moment Ethan Cole walked in with 2 attorneys at his side, silence fell like a curtain. The air crackled. He carried a briefcase, his steps deliberate, his gaze sweeping across the room with the cool precision of a man who knew he held the blade. I followed, my face still bruised, and stitched my nose, bandaged my navy dress replaced by a tailored suit. Every camera in the room tilted toward us. This time I welcomed the lights. Ethan stopped at the center of the ballroom and set the briefcase on the table. His voice carried calm but commanding. "Ladies and gentlemen, 2 nights ago, this room became the stage for something no one should ever witness: a father assaulting his daughter in an attempt to strip her of her rightful property. Many of you recorded it. Many of you shared it. Tonight we present the truth with evidence that cannot be denied." Gasps, murmurs. My father shifted his fist, tightening around his glass. "This is outrageous," he growled. "You have no right." Ethan raised a hand, silencing him with nothing but confidence. "Clause 15.3, he said, pulling a document from the briefcase. He held it up, the company letterhead gleaming under the chandeliers. This clause was written into the legal purchase agreement of the Lake Tahoe estate. It stipulates that in the event of coercion, threat, or physical harm intended to force the transfer of ownership, immediate injunctions can be filed securing the property against all claims. By announcing in this very ballroom that his daughter had agreed to gift the estate without her consent, Richard Brooks violated this clause. By striking her in front of hundreds, he ensured the violation is undeniable. He set the document on the table with a snap. One of the attorneys opened a laptop and connected it to the projector. The massive screen behind us flickered to life. My stomach twisted as the video began to play my father's booming announcement, his face flushed with drink. My voice trembling but firm as I refused, his glass shattering, his body lunging, fist colliding with my face. The sound of the crowd gasping filled the room once more, a ghostly echo of that night. My blood gleamed crimson on the floor, frozen forever in pixels. The room was deathly still. Guests stared, some covering their mouths, some shaking their heads. A woman whispered, "God, it's even worse than I remembered." Another muttered, "He should be in prison." My father's face blazed purple. He shoved back his chair, shouting, "This is manipulation. She's ungrateful. She's—" "Sit down, Richard," one of the attorneys said sharply. The authority in his voice stunned the room. My father faltered, sinking back into his seat, his chest heaving. My mother clutched his arm, her knuckles white, whispering, "Stop talking, for God's sake!" Ethan continued, "The property remains solely in Samantha Brooks' name. Attempts to challenge this will fail in court. Furthermore, criminal charges for assault have already been filed. This is not family business. This is the law." He gestured toward me. My heart thundered, but I stepped forward, my heels clicking against the marble floor. I scanned the faces, some sympathetic, some guilty for their whispers 2 nights ago, all riveted. For 31 years, I began, my voice steady though my body trembled. I was told to be silent, to be grateful, to accept humiliation in the name of family. I was gaslit, dismissed, erased, and when I refused to surrender what I built with my own hands, my own father chose violence. My gaze landed on Lily, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. "You wanted my house," I said, my voice tightening, "but you could never build one yourself. You wanted my silence, but you will hear me now. You wanted me invisible, but the world is watching." The crowd stirred. Phones lifted again, recording every word. My father tried to rise, but Ethan's attorney snapped, "Any further outburst will be used against you in court." I straightened, the bruises on my face burning, but my spirit unyielding. "I will not give you my house. I will not give you my life. You taught me that family was about power, control, obedience. But tonight, I reclaim the truth. Family without respect is not family at all." The silence that followed was thick, electric. Then a man in the corner, a board member of my father's company, stood slowly. "I saw everything he said. I've served with Richard for 20 years, and I've ignored too much. No more." Another voice joined. He's unfit to lead. Murmurs of agreement swelled until they became a wave, a chant under breaths, unfit, unfit, unfit. My father slumped in his chair, his empire crumbling before him, not with the bang of his fists, but with the truth played on screens and whispered in corners. My mother's face drained of color, her lips thin as parchment. Lily sobbed silently, her carefully curated image collapsing. I inhaled deeply, the air sharp in my lungs. For the first time in decades, I felt taller than my father, stronger than his rage. And as the cameras captured every flicker of his downfall, I knew one thing for certain: this reckoning was only the beginning. The fallout did not wait. By the next morning, the headlines blanketed every newsstand, and Chicago CEO assaults daughter at daughter's wedding caught on live stream. The video had already been viewed millions of times, dissected frame by frame on talk shows, debated on radio programs, splashed across every gossip site. My father's name, once synonymous with power and wealth, now trended alongside words like abuser tyrant, disgrace. His empire, built on fear and intimidation, began to collapse before his eyes. Within 48 hours, 6 major contracts were pulled from his company. Investors fled, stockholders demanded explanations, and the board of directors convened an emergency meeting. A statement circulated quickly. The actions of Richard Brooks are inconsistent with our values. We are initiating proceedings to remove him as CEO, effective immediately. His face, once plastered on magazine covers boasting of his business acumen, now flashed on television as a cautionary tale of arrogance and violence. At home, the fractures widened. Brian's wealthy family, mortified by the scandal attached to their new in-laws, annulled the marriage reception and quietly withdrew their financial support. Lily's fairy tale wedding curdled into public humiliation. Her husband, under pressure from his parents, refused to be dragged into the mess. Their relationship, barely days old, began to crumble. She left voicemails on my phone, her voice frantic, trembling. "Sam, please, you have to fix this. You ruined everything. Don't let Dad go down like this. Think of me, think of what people are saying." I didn't answer. For once, her tears did not bind me. My mother attempted her own damage control. She posted long rants on Facebook, insisting the video was taken out of context, that my father was provoked, that family matters should remain private. The internet responded with merciless ridicule. Screenshots of her posts circulated with captions like "Gaslighting 101" and "Protecting the Abuser" instead of the victim classic. Her credibility evaporated, her social circles shrank overnight. Friends who had once fawned over her designer dresses and curated dinner parties now distanced themselves, unwilling to be tainted by her denial. And me. For the first time, I did not feel like prey. I walked the halls of the hospital with my head high, bruises visible but no longer shameful. Colleagues from my firm sent flowers, clients called with words of solidarity. Strangers wrote emails. I went through the same thing. Thank you for standing up. For decades, I had been silenced by whispers, but now my truth had a chorus. When I returned to my Lake Tahoe house a week later, the keys cool in my palm, I paused at the door. The cedar frame smelled of pine and smoke. The windows gleamed in the sunlight. I changed the locks again, not out of fear this time, but as a ritual of reclamation. Every click of the bolt sliding into place sounded like closure. Inside, I hung a framed photo of my grandmother on the mantel, her eyes kind, her words echoing in memory. Never shrink yourself for anyone. News arrived that same evening. The board had officially voted. Richard Brooks was ousted as CEO, stripped of his power, forced into retirement under a cloud of disgrace. He would face criminal charges in court, his legal team scrambling his reputation beyond repair. The man who once roared that his word was law now sat in silence, abandoned by allies who had finally tired of his tyranny. Lily, desperate and flailing, showed up at my gate 2 weeks later. Her makeup streaked her once perfect hair tangled. "Sam," she begged, clutching the bars. "Please, let me in. We lost everything. Brian's gone. Dad's ruined. Mom's a wreck. You have to help me. We're family." Her voice cracked on the word family, the same word they had wielded as a weapon against me. I looked at her, my hand steady on the gate. "Family doesn't mean abuse, Lily. Family doesn't mean theft. You had my silence for years. You'll never have it again." I closed the gate, her sobs echoing behind me as I walked back into the sanctuary they could no longer touch. The fallout was complete. Richard lost his empire, Evelyn lost her image, Lily lost her marriage and her mask of innocence. And me, I gained what they had spent a lifetime trying to strip away: autonomy, voice, boundaries carved in steel. As I sat on the dock one evening, the lake rippling gold in the sunset, I realized that revenge had not been the punch or even the court filings. Revenge was the silence that followed when their power evaporated. Revenge was the collapse of their carefully constructed lies under the weight of truth. Revenge was me unbroken drinking coffee in the house they swore would never truly belong to me. The silence of Lake Tahoe was different after everything. It was no longer the silence of isolation of being unseen or unheard. It was a silence that healed, a silence that wrapped itself around me like a balm. Each morning, I brewed coffee in the kitchen. I had designed myself the steam rising as the first light struck the water. I would step onto the dock mug in hand and breathe in pine and lake air, reminding myself that this life was mine, not gifted, not borrowed, not stolen, but earned. In the weeks that followed, my body healed slowly. The swelling faded, the stitches dissolved, the bruises turned from violent purple to yellow before disappearing altogether. Yet I left some of the marks visible in photographs, choosing not to hide them. They were proof reminders of what I had survived, evidence that I refused to be erased again. I began therapy, something I had once dismissed as weakness, but now embraced as strength. Sitting across from a calm voice, I unraveled the tangled years of gaslighting, favoritism, and humiliation. I spoke the words I had never dared to say aloud. They never wanted me. They only wanted what I could give. The therapist nodded, her eyes steady. And you gave them enough. Now it's time to give to yourself. I poured my energy into work, designing structures that would outlast storms. Clients sought me out not just for my talent, but for my resilience, the story that had traveled farther than any blueprint. Universities invited me to lecture young women lined up after talks to whisper, "I went through the same thing. You give me hope." Every time I heard those words, I felt the chains around my younger self loosen a little more. Ethan remained by my side, not just as a mentor, but as a friend who refused to let me falter. Together, we established a foundation, the Boundary Project, dedicated to helping survivors of family abuse find housing, legal aid, and voices louder than the ones that silenced them. Standing on a stage at the launch event, I said into the microphone, "Boundaries aren't selfish, they are survival, and survival is the first step toward building a life worth living." Applause thundered, but what mattered most were the eyes in the crowd, eyes that recognized themselves in me. Eyes that finally believed escape was possible. As for my parents, they faded into the shadows of their own disgrace. My father stripped of his title-faced trial. I did not attend every hearing, but the day the guilty verdict was read, I sat in the back of the courtroom. He turned once, searching the crowd, and for the first time in my life, his gaze carried no power. He was simply a man undone by his own violence. My mother never looked at me. She clung to him even as the walls closed in her denial, calcified into desperation. Lily retreated to anonymity, her social media gone, her reputation in ashes. None of them ever set foot on my property again. One evening, as the lake shimmered under the setting sun, I thought of the girl I once was, the 8-year-old with her crayon drawing tossed into the trash, the teenager humiliated in a boardroom, the woman erased from her sister's wedding program. I wished I could reach back and tell her, "You will not stay invisible. You will not be silenced forever. One day your voice will echo louder than theirs ever did." Now, as the waves lapped gently against the dock, I whispered aloud, "I am free." The words hung in the air, solid, undeniable. Family had been the cage that held me. Boundaries were the key that freed me. Justice was the door that closed behind them. And healing was the path I walked now, step by step, into a future that belonged only to me. When I look back now, I see clearly what I could not see then. Blood alone does not define family. Respect does. Love does. And when respect and love are absent, you owe no loyalty to the people who break you. My father tried to take my house with his fists. My mother tried to protect his lies. My sister tried to turn my silence into her inheritance. But what they forgot is that silence ends. The truth always finds a way to speak. I will carry scars from that night, but they are not marks of shame. They are proof that I chose to stand, that I chose to say no, even when the cost was blood on my face and stitches in my skin. Those scars remind me that boundaries are not selfish, they are survival. And survival in the end is its own kind of victory. To anyone listening who has been told they are selfish for protecting themselves, who has been gaslit into thinking their pain is imaginary, who has been silenced for the sake of family reputation, hear me. You are not selfish. You are not dramatic. You are not invisible. Your life belongs to you, not to anyone who would diminish it. That is my story. Now I want to hear yours. Type the word justice in the comments if you believe boundaries matter. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if my story resonated with you, subscribe for more true stories of betrayal, revenge, and survival. Together, we'll prove that respect matters more than blood.